The coffee shop hummed with the usual morning chaos. Victoria Stone moved between tables with practiced efficiency, balancing 3 plates on one arm while mentally calculating if her tips would cover this month's electric bill. Her feet ached. In the cheap shoes she'd bought from the discount store, but she kept her smile bright for the customers who barely looked up from their phones as she refilled their cups. 5 years had passed since she'd walked away from the life she thought she'd have. 5 years since Benjamin Hayes had stood in their apartment and told her he couldn't do this anymore, that his business needed him more than their relationship did, that love wasn't enough when you had investors waiting and deals closing and a future to build. She'd listened to every word, watching the man she loved choose ambition over her, and she'd left without a fight because what was the point of holding on to someone who'd already let go? What he didn't know. What she'd discovered 3 weeks after that conversation was that she was carrying his child. She'd sat in the bathroom of her new apartment, staring at the positive pregnancy test, and made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. She wouldn't tell him. He'd made his choice clear. His business, his success, his carefully planned future didn't include her, and it certainly wouldn't include an unexpected baby. So she'd kept her secret, carried it through 9 months of struggle, and brought her daughter into the world with only her best friend Grace beside her. Lily was 4 now. 4 years of sleepless nights and secondhand clothes and birthday parties in their tiny apartment with homemade cake. 4 years of Victoria working every job she could find, from waitressing to cleaning offices at night, anything to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. She was tired, bone tired, the kind of exhaustion that lived in her muscles and made every movement feel like pushing through water. She cleared table 7, stacked the dirty dishes, and felt the room tilt sideways. Just for a moment. Just enough to make her grab the edge of the table. A customer looked up at her with concern, but Victoria waved her off with a practiced smile. She was fine. She was always fine. She had to be fine because there was no one else to be strong for Lily. The dizziness passed, and she carried the dishes to the kitchen. Her manager, a stern woman named Patricia, glanced at her with narrowed eyes. "You look pale," she said. Victoria shook her head. "Just tired. Didn't sleep." Well, Patricia didn't look convinced, but the lunch rush was starting, and there wasn't time for concern. "Get back out there. Table 12 needs their order taken." Victoria tied her apron tighter and pushed through the swinging door back into the dining room. The faces blurred together. Businessmen in expensive suits, college students hunched over laptops, a mother trying to calm a crying toddler. She took orders, delivered food, smiled until her cheeks hurt. The pain in her chest started small. A flutter like a bird trapped behind her ribs. She pressed her hand against her sternum and kept moving. Probably just heartburn from the coffee she'd gulped down at 6 that morning. Probably nothing. By 2 in the afternoon, the pain had spread. It crawled up her shoulder, down her left arm. Her breath came in short gasps that she tried to hide between trips to the kitchen. Grace had Lily for the day, thank goodness. Grace, who worked as a teacher and always offered to watch Lily when Victoria had double shifts. Grace, who knew every secret Victoria carried and never judged her for the choices she'd made. Table 18 needed their check. Victoria reached for the receipt pad, and the room spun violently. The edges of her vision went dark, closing in like curtains. She heard someone call her name, felt her knees give out. The floor rose up to meet her, cold and hard, and then there was nothing but darkness. She woke to bright lights and the smell of antiseptic. A hospital. The ceiling tiles had water stains. She counted them, trying to orient herself, trying to remember how she'd gotten here. A nurse appeared above her, young with kind eyes. "You're awake. Good. You gave everyone quite a scare." Victoria tried to sit up, but gentle hands pressed her back down. "Where's my daughter?" she asked. Her voice came out rough, barely a whisper. The nurse checked the IV in her arm. "Your friend Grace called. She's taking care of your little girl. You need to rest now." But Victoria couldn't rest. Her mind raced through a mental checklist of disasters. The hospital bills, the missed shifts, the rent due next week. She didn't have insurance. The coffee shop didn't offer benefits, and she couldn't afford private coverage. How much would this cost? How much would ruin her completely? A doctor entered the room, clipboard in hand. He was middle-aged with gray at his temples and the serious expression of someone about to deliver bad news. "Miss Stone," he said, pulling up a chair beside her bed, "you had a cardiac episode. Your heart stopped briefly. We managed to resuscitate you, but the tests show you have a severe valve problem. It's been developing for a while, likely causing the exhaustion and dizziness you've been experiencing." Victoria stared at him, processing the words that didn't quite make sense. "My heart stopped." The doctor nodded. "You need surgery. Soon. Within the next few days, if possible. It's a major procedure, but without it, your prognosis is very poor." The room felt cold, despite the thin blanket covering her. "How much?" she asked. The doctor hesitated. "With the surgery, hospital stay, and follow-up care, you're looking at roughly $300,000, give or take." Victoria's laugh came out bitter and broken. 300,000. She didn't have $300. She didn't have $30 after paying last month's bills. "I can't afford that," she said. The doctor's expression softened, with pity. "We have social workers who can help you explore options. Payment plans, charity care, possibly state assistance. But the process takes time. Time you may not have." Victoria closed her eyes. 5 years of surviving on her own. 5 years of doing everything right, working herself to exhaustion, keeping Lily fed and clothed and happy. And this was how it ended. With a broken heart, literally and figuratively, and no way to fix it. She thought of Lily, who would come, home from preschool next week, excited about the macaroni art she'd made. Lily, who still believed her mother could fix anything. Lily, who would have to grow up without her because Victoria couldn't afford to stay alive. The tears came hot and fast, soaking into the rough hospital pillow. The nurse touched her shoulder gently. "We're going to do everything we can," she promised. But Victoria knew the truth. In a world where health care came with a price tag, everything they could do might not be enough. The doctor left with promises to return later. The nurse adjusted her IV and slipped out quietly. And Victoria lay in that sterile room, listening to the beep of machines monitoring her failing heart, wondering how Benjamin Hayes was doing with his successful business and his carefully planned future, wondering if he ever thought about her, never imagining that her life and his were about to collide again in the most unexpected way. Benjamin Hayes stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, watching the city spread out below him like a game board where he'd already won. 40 stories up, the traffic looked like toy cars, the people like ants moving through, their insignificant lives. He'd built this empire from nothing. Well, not nothing. From 70-hour work weeks and missed dinners and relationships sacrificed at the altar of success, 5 years of clawing his way to the top, and now he had everything he'd ever wanted, except he felt empty. His assistant knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "Mr. Hayes, there's someone from St. Catherine's Hospital on line 3. Something about the foundation." Benjamin waved his hand dismissively. "Have Robert handle it? That's what I pay him for." The assistant, a nervous young man named Thomas, shifted his weight. "They specifically asked for you, sir. Said it's urgent and requires your personal attention." Benjamin sighed and reached for the phone. "This better be important," he muttered. Thomas retreated quickly, closing the door behind him. Benjamin punched the button for line 3. Hayes speaking. The voice on the other end was female, professional but warm. "Mr. Hayes, This is Caroline Pierce from St. Catherine's Hospital Foundation. Thank you for taking my call. I know you're a busy man. Get to the point, Benjamin said, glancing at his watch. He had a meeting in 20 minutes. We have a patient in critical condition who needs immediate surgery. She has no insurance, no family able to help, and without intervention, she'll die within the week. Your company's charitable foundation has been recommended as a potential resource. We're hoping you might consider covering her medical costs. Benjamin had heard these requests before. Every month, his foundation received dozens of applications from worthy causes. He'd set up a system specifically to avoid dealing with them, personally. That's what the board is for. Submit the application through proper channels. Mr. Hayes, the woman paused. This case is time-sensitive. The board won't meet again for 2 weeks. She'll be dead by then. Something in her voice made Benjamin hesitate. How much are we talking about? $300,000 for the surgery and immediate care, possibly more depending on complications. Benjamin did the math in his head. $300,000 was nothing to him now. He'd spent more than that on his car, but he didn't get where he was by making emotional decisions based on sob stories. Send me her file, he said. I'll review it tonight. Mr. Hayes, with respect. Tonight might be too late. Benjamin felt irritation spike through him. Then what exactly do you want from me? Come to the hospital. Meet her. See the situation for yourself. Sometimes these things require a human touch, not just a signature on a check. Benjamin almost said no. He had important things to do, meetings that mattered, decisions that would affect his bottom line. But something nagged at him. Some small voice that sounded suspiciously like the man he used to be before the business consumed everything. Fine, he heard himself say. I'll be there in an hour. Caroline Pierce's relief was audible through the phone. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. You're saving a life today. The drive to St. Catherine's took 40 minutes through afternoon traffic. Benjamin sat in the back of his town car, reviewing quarterly reports on his tablet, trying not to think about why he'd agreed to this. He never made personal visits for charitable cases. That's what writing checks was for. Clean, simple, no emotional entanglement. But here he was, pulling up to a mid-tier hospital in a neighborhood he'd never normally visit, for a woman whose name he didn't even know yet. Caroline Pierce met him in the lobby. She was older than he'd imagined, maybe 50, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that had seen too much suffering. Mr. Hayes, she said, shaking his hand firmly. Thank you for coming. I know this is unusual. Benjamin followed her through sterile corridors that smelled of cleaning solution and desperation. How long has she been here? He asked. 2 days. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning if we can secure funding. Otherwise, the hospital will have to discharge her and refer her to county services, which could take weeks she doesn't have. They stopped outside a door marked 412. She's sleeping now, Caroline said quietly. The medication makes her drowsy. You can see her through the window if you'd like. Benjamin stepped forward and looked through the glass panel in the door. The woman in the bed was turned away from him, dark hair spilling across the pillow, her frame small and fragile under the white sheets. Something about the curve of her shoulder, the way her hand rested on the blanket, struck him as familiar. What's her name? He asked. Victoria Stone. The name hit him like a physical blow. Benjamin felt the air leave his lungs. He gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. That's not possible, he whispered. Caroline looked at him with concern. Mr. Hayes, are you all right? Do you need to sit down? He shook his head, unable to take his eyes off the woman in the bed. Victoria. His Victoria. The woman he'd pushed away 5 years ago because he'd been so certain that success mattered more than love. The woman he'd thought about every single day since, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. You know her, Caroline said. It wasn't a question. Benjamin nodded slowly. We were together. Years ago. I didn't know she was sick. I didn't know she was here. Caroline's expression softened. Life has a strange way of bringing people back together. The question is, what will you do now? Benjamin stared through the glass, watching Victoria's chest rise and fall with each breath. 5 years. 5 years of building his empire while she'd apparently been struggling alone. The guilt crashed over him in waves. What happened to her? He asked hoarsely. Caroline consulted her tablet. She works 3 jobs. Waitress, night cleaning crew, weekend retail, no health insurance. The stress and exhaustion apparently masked the symptoms of her heart condition until it became critical. She collapsed at work 2 days ago. Cardiac arrest. She's lucky to be alive. Benjamin closed his eyes. This was his fault. He'd chosen money over her, success over love, and she'd been left to survive on her own, working herself to death while he sat in his ivory tower counting his profits. "Is there family?" he asked. "Anyone helping her?" Caroline shook her head. "Just a friend named Grace Mitchell. She's been bringing Victoria's daughter to visit." Benjamin's head snapped up. "Daughter." Caroline nodded. "A little girl, 4 years old." The timeline clicked into place in Benjamin's mind with devastating clarity. 4 years old. Victoria had been pregnant when they split. She'd been carrying his child and never told him. The anger that should have come didn't materialize. Instead, he felt only crushing sadness. She'd faced pregnancy alone, childbirth alone. 4 years of raising their daughter alone because he'd made it clear his priorities lay elsewhere. "I'll cover everything," he said. "The surgery, the recovery, whatever she needs." Caroline's face lit up. "Mr. Hayes, that's incredibly generous." "There's just one condition," Benjamin continued. "She doesn't know it's me. You find another name for the donor. A foundation, an anonymous, benefactor, anything." "But she doesn't know I'm involved." Caroline frowned. "May I ask why?" "Because she has every reason to hate me," Benjamin said quietly. "And because I need to figure out how to tell her I just discovered I have a daughter." He stayed at the hospital for another hour, hiding in the administrative offices while Caroline made the arrangements. The surgery would proceed as scheduled, all costs covered. Victoria would live and hopefully recover fully. But Benjamin knew that money couldn't fix what he'd broken 5 years ago. As he walked back through the corridors toward the exit, he passed a waiting room where a little girl sat coloring at a small table. She had dark curly hair and was humming to herself, completely absorbed in her artwork. A woman sat beside her, Grace, presumably, scrolling through her phone. Benjamin stopped in the doorway, transfixed. The little girl looked up and their eyes met. She had his eyes. The same green-gray shade, the same shape. His daughter. The child he didn't know existed until an hour ago. The child Victoria had raised alone while he'd been too busy building his empire to even check if she was okay. The little girl smiled at him, innocent and trusting, and Benjamin felt his heart crack open in a way his business deals never had. He turned and walked away quickly before Grace could notice him, before he could do something stupid like introduce himself. But as he climbed into his town car and told his driver to take him home, Benjamin knew his carefully constructed life had just shattered. Everything he'd built, everything he'd achieved, suddenly meant nothing compared to the woman fighting for her life in room 412 and the daughter who didn't know he existed. Tomorrow Victoria would have her surgery. She would live. And then Benjamin would have to face the consequences of the choice he'd made 5 years ago, the choice that had left her alone and struggling while he'd been too blind to see what truly mattered. Victoria woke to the sound of machines beeping steadily beside her bed. The surgery was over. She was alive. The realization came slowly, filtering through the fog of anesthesia and pain medication. Her chest hurt, a deep ache that radiated through her ribs, but it was different from before. Not the crushing pressure that had sent her to the floor of the coffee shop, but the hurt of healing, of something broken being put back together. Grace sat in the chair beside her bed, head tilted back, against the wall sleeping. Victoria watched her friend and felt tears prick her eyes. Grace had been there through everything. The pregnancy, the sleepless nights with a newborn, every moment Victoria thought she couldn't keep going. And here she was again, keeping vigil, while Victoria fought her way back from the edge. A nurse entered quietly, checking the monitors with practiced efficiency. "You're awake," she said softly, adjusting the IV drip. "How's your pain level?" Victoria tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. The nurse held a cup with a straw to her lips, and Victoria sipped gratefully. "Better," she managed. "Much better." The nurse smiled. The surgery went perfectly. "Dr. Morrison said your heart valve was in worse shape than the scans showed, but they replaced it successfully. You're going to be fine." "How did this happen?" Victoria asked. "The surgery, I mean. I don't have the money. I thought they were going to discharge me." The nurse's smile widened. An anonymous donor covered everything. The surgery, your hospital stay, all your medications and follow-up care. Everything. Victoria stared at her in disbelief. "That's not possible. Who would do that?" The nurse shrugged. "The foundation coordinator said the donor wanted to remain anonymous. Sometimes miracles happen when you need them most." Grace stirred and opened her eyes, immediately sitting forward when she saw Victoria was awake. "You're okay," she breathed, reaching for Victoria's hand. "Oh, thank goodness, you're okay." The tears came then, streaming down both their faces. Victoria squeezed Grace's hand weakly. "Where's Lily?" she asked. Grace wiped her eyes. "She's with my mother today. I didn't want to bring her until you were awake. She's been asking for you constantly. She made you a get-well card with about 1,000,000 stickers on it." Victoria's heart ached with missing her daughter. "Can you bring her tomorrow? I need to see her." Grace nodded. "Of course. She'll be so excited." Victoria closed her eyes. Exhaustion, pulling at her despite having just woken up. "Grace," she whispered, "who paid for the surgery?" "Really?" Grace hesitated. "I don't know. The hospital just said it was handled. But Victoria, someone did ask about you yesterday. A man. He was here looking, through the window of your room." Victoria's eyes opened. "What man?" "I don't know," Grace said slowly. "He looked familiar somehow, but I couldn't place him. Expensive suit, tall, dark hair. He seemed really upset when he saw you. The nurse came back and he disappeared." Something cold settled in Victoria's stomach. It couldn't be. After 5 years, there was no chance Benjamin Hayes would suddenly appear at her bedside. He'd made his choice. He'd moved on. This was just coincidence. Had to be. The next 3 days passed in a blur of physical therapy, medication adjustments, and slow healing. Victoria learned to walk again, to breathe deeply without feeling like her chest would split open. Grace brought Lily on the 4th day, and Victoria cried when her daughter ran to her bedside, careful but desperate for a hug. "Mommy," Lily said, her small face serious. "The doctor said you had a broken heart, but they fixed it." "Yes, baby," Victoria whispered into her daughter's hair. "They fixed it." Lily pulled back and studied her mother's face. "Are you going to be okay? Now?" Victoria nodded. "I'm going to be just fine." She was scheduled for discharge the next morning when Caroline Pierce knocked on her door. Victoria had met her briefly before the surgery, the woman who'd arranged the anonymous donation. "Miss Stone?" Caroline said, settling into the visitor's chair. "How are you feeling?" "Grateful," Victoria said honestly. "I still can't believe someone paid for everything. I don't even know how to thank them." Caroline smiled gently. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you. The donor wasn't completely anonymous. He asked me not to reveal his identity initially, but he's ready to tell you himself now." If you're willing to see him. Victoria's pulse quickened, the monitor beside her bed beeping faster. Who is it? Before Caroline could answer, the door opened, and Benjamin Hayes walked in. Victoria felt the air leave her lungs. 5 years disappeared in an instant. He looked different, older, more polished in his expensive suit with his hair perfectly styled. But his eyes were the same. Those green-gray eyes she'd once loved, now filled with something that looked like regret. "Hello, Victoria," he said quietly. His voice sent shivers down her spine, familiar and foreign all at once. Caroline slipped out, closing the door behind her, leaving them alone. "What are you doing here?" Victoria managed to say. Benjamin moved closer, stopping at the foot of her bed. "I paid for your surgery. For everything." The anger came swift and hot. "You had no right," she said. "No right to come back into my life, to play hero, to think you can just fix things with money." Benjamin flinched but didn't look away. "You're right," he said. "I don't have that right. But I couldn't let you die, Victoria. When the hospital called, when I saw you through that window, I realized I'd spent 5 years lying to myself, telling myself I made the right choice, that my business mattered more than what we had, that I could build a life worth living without you in it." He took a breath. "I was wrong about everything." Victoria shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to walk away and then swoop in years later acting like some kind of savior. I survived without you, Benjamin. I've been surviving without you." She paused, her voice breaking. "I had our baby alone, raised her alone, worked myself into the ground alone because you made it clear I wasn't enough for you." Benjamin's face went pale. "I saw her," he said softly. "Your daughter. Our daughter. She has my eyes." Victoria felt her defenses crumble. "Her name is Lily. She's 4 years old, she's brilliant and funny and the best thing that ever happened to me. And I never told you because you chose your empire over us. You made that choice before you even knew she existed." "I would have stayed," Benjamin said, his voice raw. "If I'd known. If you'd told me." "Would you?" Victoria challenged. "Or would you have resented us? Felt trapped? Built your business empire while wishing you were free?" Benjamin had no answer for that. They both knew the truth. 5 years ago, a baby would have been an obstacle to him, not a blessing. But something had changed in Benjamin's face, in the way he looked at her. "I can't take back the past," he said. "I can't undo the hurt I caused or the years you struggled alone. But I want to know my daughter, Victoria. I want to be part of her life. And if you'll let me, I want a chance to prove I'm not that same selfish man anymore." Victoria closed her eyes. Every instinct told her to say no, to protect herself and Lily from the pain of letting him in, only to watch him leave again. But she thought of Lily's question in the hospital room. "Are you going to be okay now?" Maybe being okay meant more than just surviving. Maybe it meant taking a risk on second chances. "She'll need time," Victoria said finally. "She doesn't know about you. She thinks her father left before she was born. You can't just walk in and expect her to understand." Benjamin nodded. "I'll wait as long as it takes." Victoria studied his face, searching for the man she'd once loved beneath the polished exterior of success. Maybe he was still there. Maybe people could change. Maybe broken hearts could heal stronger than before. "Tomorrow," she said, "bring something for a 4-year-old who loves butterflies and purple crayons." Benjamin's face transformed with a smile that reminded Victoria of the man he used to be. "Tomorrow," he agreed. And Victoria felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest, where fear had lived for so long. Hope, fragile and uncertain, but real. The story wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning again.